Good morning. Happy birthday. Happy 18th birthday to my oldest son, Riley. Eternally proud of you, and I know that you will, from this starting point, grow into a man that you will be proud of. That's the real lesson. I've got a difficult topic, a very complicated thing to discuss this morning that has been dawning on me over the last couple of days, and I'm going to attempt. This is like it's like attempting to just get this out in one go, and I have the whiteboard to try and do this because it's three-dimensional, it's very complicated, and I believe within this shows the programming error, really, like the coding error that is malfunctioning in order to create this chaos between my eldest son and my other two children's mother and myself. And it's you'll actually then see it's very unfair that these two people are being forced to weather a storm that they didn't create, didn't participate in, basically these programming errors are driving us to a situation that is crazy, and I just have the patience and the wherewithal and the unstoppable nature to expose it. So we need to go back to 1932. And the reason we're going to talk about 1932, what is happening there? Anyway, we'll put this here. 1932. My father, Graham Sidney Arthur Wise, was born in Hobart, Tasmania. Now, at this time, King George the Fourth, I believe, was king. Again, this isn't the key point. At this time, until 1936, which King Edward the Eighth was, and that's, you meant to write it in Roman numerals, but I wrote an 8, was born in 1932. He was made, so King George V, I think, or the Fourth, I think, could be wrong, was king when my father was born, of England, of the British Empire, which included Australia, which included Tasmania. So my father was born into the British Empire. He was still in the British Empire when that king died, and his son became king, who was King Edward the Eighth, and he became king in 1936. So my father was 4 years old. 4 years old. This was during the Great Depression was all around this period as well. Now, King Edward the Eighth was forced to abdicate because the government of the United Kingdom, was it the United Kingdom then, or this is where it gets really fucking complicated, because he wished to marry a divorcee, so he was forced to abdicate throne. This is basically the position where I say this wasn't a forced abdication, this was a communist revolution by design. All they did was basically slow it down. Now, I can't tell whether this was Churchill's idea, because Churchill was the Prime Minister around, but actually he wasn't, I don't think. I think it was Chamberlain, or maybe it was Churchill at that time. Something's gone on there where they forced King Edward to abdicate because he was not allowed to marry an American divorcee. Yet in 2025, what percentage now of marriages are now between divorcees, where one participant of that marriage is divorcee, and who is the intermediary that operates in lieu of all these divorces is the government. So the government has basically become the government now is doing what kings used to do hundreds of years ago, where they would marry all the people. They would own them all. But they're doing it through divorce. So they've allowed divorce, and then they're doing this. Now, the important thing to know in my situation with my children, I was never married, because I was very young when we didn't sit there and plan a family. A family happened, and because of circumstances around the family, it was unthinkable to terminate. Now, this would have also been because at this time, abortion was just as fucking legal and frowned upon as divorce. So we've gone from, like, my father was born into a paradigm where divorce and abortion were unthinkable. Now, this shows me these two things they're linked. Obviously, they're the same thing. An abortion is a divorce from God, I think. Unless it's under, really severe circumstances. I don't think anything's ever an exact science. But then, if we continue on, we get to and I'm sure it was the 70s, so it's like 1970s, let's say, some period in this. My mother was married to her first husband. My father was married to his first wife. They didn't have children. My mother's family did have children. There was a divorce in my mother's side of the family. So it's basically what my argument is, my father was born into a inevitable war against himself. Because it's like King Edward was punished because of his wife's divorce, not his own. He was never divorced. He chose a woman that was suitable, and it's it seems like, if I go back and I think what would have changed the world for the better, I'd say that would be it. I'd say it would be letting King Edward be the fucking king. And then I get to a weird point where I think that actually is what happened. Because also around this time, King Edward really, because his father, George, I think his father was George, was older and he'd come in, whatever, and there was this period of the press had existed, but radio was quite new. So we had radio, film. This is the era of radio and film. This is the same point. Now, I know from lots of experience in this and rigorous research and finding out, this was a false reality. It wasn't real. The world was organised in person, using the structures that now hold the imposters of this era that is now, what is that, almost 70, 90 years on. So we've had almost 90 years of false, projected order via broadcasting, via media, that has destabilised everything down to the point where we're now promoting divorce and abortion via the media, all adjudicated by the government. Now, but this has all happened within one man, my father, all within his lifetime, where at no point was his opinion or his experiences allowed to be spoken about. Because very quickly after King Edward, it was Elizabeth's father, and I think again King George. I think he was King George V during the war. Then, so we had World War II. And it's like, well, it looks like that forced abdication of King Edward VIII really is what caused World War II, which caused the horrific conclusions to World War II, which were when there's a war and everyone was back against it. This is where the horrific things that we remember that period from. It started as a war, normal kind of war. There was persecution of the Jews, but there was persecution of the Jews in England hundreds of years before that. The Jews had been persecuted the whole time. That was the horrific conclusion that World War II led to under pressure from a war. And under the cover of war, they thought they could do this. They were, and this was all intelligence, and all covert. They weren't publishing exactly what was happening, and so we have all these elements, and all I can see is like, well, from this period, we'd had the Bolshevik Revolution just before it. Obviously, King Edward had the largest target on his head from a rising socialist, communist, global kind of movement. And I think there was a decision made that him as a sole king without a family had no chance of combating that socialist communist revolution. So this is where we need to get down to base. It's like, was this a 90-year intelligence operation to almost like walk down the line of what a slow communist revolution would be, to get to the inevitable point where you have a very observant person that happens to have key people in key places at key times with the same thing, that had enough knowledge of history to pinpoint it and to say, well, my case is against the state, is against the government of Australia, the government of the United Kingdom, and I'm claiming that you have stolen my children in a communist revolution, and that this is direct treason, because you have 180 degrees changed the reality of the world within my father's lifetime. And upon my father dying is when all this chaos in my own environment was created. And I have both my children's mother and my mother working together to bring in this communist revolution in the shadows. I'm using this. I'm using broadcasting of my own. This wasn't an option back here in 1936. Or it was. You could write a book. But the radio, the film and the broadcasting went straight to top tier because it was supported by the government. That was the moment. That was the moment that they overtook the monarchy in a revolution that wasn't needed, that led us to nowhere. If we think of this like divorce is shouldn't think of it. See, my claim against divorce, in pro-divorce, is I lived in the paradigm of divorce. Both my parents had been divorced. Everyone around me was divorced. Every program I watched was divorced. I was birthed in that. But the reality of that didn't work for me. It only works for women. Because all the women are getting divorced and then marrying the government. That was never spoken about because it existed in the closed-loop broadcasting world that the government had been spurting out for 90 years or 80 years. And so divorce is abandonment. It's like I abandoned my partnership, which again, it would have been pressure to be married, so we would have been married had I been born in 1932, like my father. I would have married my children's mother, and we would have been protected by the popular culture of the time. by the social norm. But we weren't. And it wouldn't have mattered whether we were married. We were the outcasts because we had procreated. We had dared to procreate. So we, from the moment that we decided to keep that back, we were fighting a losing war against the combined government propaganda and the combined, commercial propaganda to support divorce and to support abortion. So the 14, 15